Alright, so we are now going to learn the algebraic notation, which is by far the most common way to describe the moves in a game. And the principle behind it is just very simple. Remember, when we play chess, we have to move. Moving is compulsory. And besides castling, we normally move a piece to a square. So we basically need to know what piece we're going to move and where it will go to. And remember when I spoke about the chessboard, that I spoke about these numbers and letters that we have on the board, and this will help us identify the squares with a code. And this is actually very helpful because so far I've been speaking about moving a piece to this square or to that square, but giving a code, giving something more concrete is normally much better to understand. Sometimes we might even discuss moves without the chessboard. That's why knowing chess notation is going to help you a lot in different ways. When you discuss moves, when you read games, when you write moves. It will depend on the time control, but normally when you play competitive games with long time controls, then it can be compulsory to write the moves, so you need to know chess notation. That's why this video is going to help you a lot in many different ways. Let's go back to this idea of identifying a square. Remember that we spoke about the rows and the columns of the chessboard, that we call them ranks and files. So ranks are simply identified with numbers. So ranks go from 1 to 8. 1 being the rank where white will place their pieces that are not pawns. On the second rank we place the pawns, and similarly black places the pawns on the 7th rank and the other pieces on the 8th rank. The other ranks, they can be simply identified. For example, this is a square on the 5th rank. And now columns, we simply identify them with letters. In order to avoid a misunderstanding between ranks and columns, we simply use numbers for ranks and letter for columns. And the columns go from A to H. So for example, queens on their initial positions are placed on the D file. And let's imagine that I want to identify on which specific square white's queen is placed. Then we simply look at the rank and the file, and we get the square D1. Similarly, black's queen is on the square D8. And the great thing about this system is that there's no ambiguity. If I name a square, it will not depend whether I'm looking at that from white's perspective or black's perspective. It's going to be the same square for both players. So let's select any random square. For example, here we look at the file and the rank. So normally we use letters first, and then we get G5. And this is really a matter of practice. It is not complicated. So in the beginning, I'm going to mention many squares when I move. You might get confused, but in any case, you can see how I make the moves on the chessboard. But after a while, you're going to get used to it, and it's not going to be that hard. So now that we know the squares, we're going to identify the letter that we use for a piece. Instead of writing, for example, knight goes to F3, which is very long, we use a letter to identify a piece, and we mention the square. And we use a K for a king, Q for a queen, R for a rook, B for a bishop, and N for a knight. So let's imagine that I want to move this knight to this square. We simply name the piece that we move, which is a knight, so we use an N, and it goes to this square, which is F3. Therefore, we use NF3 to identify this move. And I think that it's going to be easier to see all this if I show you one random game and we start to read the moves. So let's imagine that you get this game and you have to read it. So first of all, you have some general information about the game, and it is very common to have on top the name of the players, and you may have some additional information like the name of the tournament and even the place on which the game was played, if this was an over-the-board game. You may also have the date on which the game was played, and then you have the moves. So here, as you can see, you only have, on the first move, you only have squares. And this is a rule that applies only for pawns. Whenever we don't mention anything, this means that we move a pawn. And as I had mentioned before, one move is a move by white and black. So here we see that we have 1 d4 f5. So let's go back to the chessboard and try to make these moves. So 1 d4 means, first of all, white starts. So white moves a pawn because we don't specify any piece. And a pawn moves to the d4 square. And this is the only pawn that can go to the d4 square. Therefore, we have the first move. Remember that on the first move, pawns can move 1 or 2 squares forward. And black does the same. Black plays the move f5. black moves a pawn. But on the second move, we see that we have n f3. Actually, I explained this move before. We have the knight going to f3, and similarly black moves a knight n to f6 to another square. And we simply start moving the pieces. And therefore we just follow the score sheet this way. And this is actually a very good exercise if you ever want to improve your understanding of chess notation. You just practice by going through a game. That might be a great exercise. And here, as you can see, there are other symbols. An X means a capture. So for example, if I go to the 12th move, we get nx d2. And whenever we have a capture, we just simply place the square after that, because we are capturing a piece that is going to be on a square. Only one piece can be on a square. Therefore, we don't need to specify what we capture because only one piece is going to be in that square. So this is the position after white played f3 on the 12th move, and now it is black to play on the 12th move as well. So here we get nx d2. That means that the knight captures a piece on d2. So this is the move that was played. It is also important to identify castling, and we use 2 zeros to identify castling short and 3 zeros when we castle long. So if we look at this game, on the 5th move, we see that black castles because white plays e3 and then black castles short. Therefore, we can go to the game and see how black castled in that game. Another symbol that you might see a lot is a plus sign, which means that we give a check. So whenever we have a plus, is a check, and a numeral is a checkmate. So here we see in the last move that we get a checkmate, and actually then we have the result. And since we see that this is a black move because it's on the 74th move, we see that white played king to e1 and then black played a1r and gives a checkmate. So we get the result, which is 0-1 because black won. If white wins, then we get 1-0. And if we get a draw by any of the reasons that we studied, then each side gets half a point. Some tournaments might give different points for draws and wins, but this is by far the most common way to give 1 point for a win, 0 points for a loss, and half a point for a draw. And actually the last move might be a bit confusing because you see that we get a square and then a piece. Here we have a promotion actually. So first of all, we have only a square, so this gives us a hint that it was a pawn that moved. And since we get a piece after that, it means that it promoted to a piece, in this case a rook. Remember that an R is a rook. So this is actually the position after white played the move king to e1. And here we get this pawn that is about to promote because we're looking at the position from white side. So black is advancing this way. That's why we get a1r, because the pawn promoted to a rook in this particular case. Normally we promote to a queen, but in this case either promoted to a queen or to a rook gives a checkmate. So in any case, whenever we promote, we just write the square and the piece we promote to. So here we have another example, a1q, so we promoted to a queen, and in this particular case we gave a check. Sometimes we can promote and not give a check or a checkmate, so in that case it would simply be a1q, but here we promoted to a queen and we gave a check. And last, I want to mention a more advanced case that might not happen very often, but sometimes we might have two pieces that might land on the same square. In that case, we need to give some additional information about which piece goes to that square. And in this game, we actually have that case. For example, if we check the 9th move, we see nb d2. So first of all, something will go to the d2 square. It's going to be a knight, but we see that we have this b. So we identify that it's a knight that is on the b file, that is going to d2. Let's check why. Let's go to that position before white made that move. So here we could see that the knight on the b file will move to d2. And why is it clarified there? Because this knight could have also gone to that square, the knight on the f file. So in that case, we would have simply written nf d2. So wait, we now have learned how to read games, how to identify squares clearly. So from now onwards, I'm going to make the moves and use algebraic notation when speaking about the moves. In any case, you're going to see them on the board, so don't worry too much about it, but it's great that you're going to become more familiar about the system. That will help you a lot to visualize the board more clearly.